We have been going through the Gospel of John, and you might have noticed that the book divides itself in half very comfortably. Chapters 1 through 11 is the first half, and chapters 1 through 11 covers days and weeks and months and years. I mean, the first 11 chapters nearly covers the entire life and ministry of Jesus. It's amazing how much he got in 11 chapters. We're jumping months and years in between verses. And then we get to chapter 12, and things slow down considerably. Beginning in chapter 12, we're no longer looking at months and years. We're looking at days and hours. In chapter 13, we get to the upper room. We have this upper room discourse. And when I think of the upper room, I don't know about you, when I think of the upper room, I start thinking about, well, I know the upper room. That's where Jesus instituted the Lord's Supper. But there's no mention of the Lord's Supper at all in the Gospel of John. John is so much more personal. How are you guys going to survive what you're about to go through? Jesus knows he's about to die. It's no surprise to Jesus, but the disciples have no idea what's going to happen. And he wants them to know this is going to be a tough time. You are going to lament. You're going to be devastated. You are going to be overwhelmed by what happens in the next few hours. And so he's preparing him for this. And we're in chapter 16 now. I'm picking up the story in verse 16. He says, "A little while, and you will no longer see me. And again, a little while, and you will see me." Some of his disciples then said to one another, "What's this thing he's telling us? A little while, and you will not see me. And again, a little while, and you will see me. And because I go to the Father." So they were saying, what is this that he says, a little while? We do not know what he's talking about. Jesus knew that they wished to question him, and he said to them, "Are you deliberating together about this, that I said a little while, and you will not see me, and again a little while, and you will see me? Truly, truly, I say to you that you will weep and lament, but the world will rejoice. You will grieve, but your grief will be turned into joy. Whenever a woman is in labor, she has pain because her hour has come. But when she gives birth to the child, she no longer remembers the anguish because of the joy that a child has been born into the world. Therefore, you too have grief now, but I will see you again, and your heart will rejoice, and no one will take your joy away from you." A little while, a little while. A little while you won't see me. A little while you will see me. A clever preacher, he called this sermon, he says, "Now you see me, now you don't." What's he talking about? A little while, and a little while, and a little while. Disciples are confused. They don't know what's going on. You know, life can be really confusing. Life can be really confusing. What is it you want out of life? What is it you want out of life? What is it you want for your children? Most people will answer that, well, I want to be happy. I want my kids to be happy. I want happiness. And what do you mean by happiness? Well, I want to be free from struggles and suffering. I want to be free from stress. I want to be free from trials. I want to have plenty of money. I want to have great relationships. But happiness, as we typically defined it, is an unrealistic expectation. It's unrealistic expectation. And we talk about happiness, and happiness has so much to do with our circumstances. There's more to life than happiness. And Jesus uses the term joy. He talks about rejoicing and having joy. And that's what we're going to be looking at in this text. How do you find joy when you're overwhelmed with sorrow? And it's not just a change of perspective, it is a change of reality that Jesus is going to be talking about. And so we're going to see him coming and going, and that's important that we notice what he says about he's going and he's coming. But the emphasis of this text is turning sorrow into joy. God will turn sorrow into joy. a little while, he says. Now, this is Jesus' shorthand. Jesus speaks in shorthand quite a bit. And we know the shorthand he uses, this hour. My hour has not yet come. Back in John, the 2nd chapter, verse 4. Go ahead and put John, the 2nd chapter up here, verse 4 for me. Jesus said to her, "What business do you have with me, woman? My hour has not yet come." In chapter 7, Jesus said to them, my time is not yet here, but your time is always ready. In verse 30, and they were seeking to arrest him, and yet no one laid hand on him because his hour had not yet come. And no one arrested him because his hour had not yet come. And he keeps speaking about my hour has not yet come. And so we know the shorthand. We know that the hour that Jesus is speaking about is his death, the cross. My time for my death is not yet come. And then he uses this term, a little while. And he's been using it all along. Maybe like them, they just read over it. I didn't even notice that he'd been saying this a little while. Back in John 7, verse 33. Therefore Jesus said, "For a little while longer I'm going to be with you, and then I'm going to him who sent me." And then in chapter 12, so Jesus said to them, "For a little while longer the light is among you. Walk while you have the light, so that darkness will not overtake you. Also, the one who walks in the darkness does not know where he is going." I'm here for a little while. In chapter 13, "Little children, I'm still with you a little longer. You will look for me. And just as I said to you and to the Jews, now I also say to you, where I am going, you cannot come." And then in chapter 14, "After a little while, the world no longer is going to see me, but you're going to see me. Because I live, you also will live." And so he's using the shorthand, in a little while, in a little while. What he's meaning is a little while longer, just a short time more. And now we're literally talking about hours. In a little while, you will not see me. He's going to be dead. And in a little while, you will see me again. He's going to be resurrected from the dead. And so that's what he's talking about, this little shorthand. In a little while, I'll be dead. In a little while, I'll be resurrected. We're talking about hours, not days. And then verse 20, he comes and says, "Truly, truly." Now, he's using the word is amen. Amen, amen. You know, you can go through all the Greek writing you want. There's no one that starts their sentence with amen, amen. Only Jesus. It's a unique thing to him. Amen. I'm going to tell you the truth. What he's saying is, pay attention now. Listen, guys. I know you're confused. I know you don't know what I'm talking about. But listen up. Listen to what I'm about to say. I say to you that you will weep and lament, but the world will rejoice. You will grieve, but your grief will be turned into joy. I want you to know that. You're going to be grieving. You're going to be weeping. You're going to be lamenting. And the world's going to be happy. They're thinking things are great. At the cross, the religious leaders were jubilant. They thought they'd finally gotten rid of this troublemaker. They thought, now he knows who's the boss. Now he knows who's in charge. Satan must have been dancing a jig, but the disciples were devastated. You get a little bit of insight into how devastated they were in Luke, the 24th chapter, when Jesus meets the disciples on the road to Emmaus. And he said to them, "What sort of things?" And they said to him, "Those about Jesus the Nazarene, who proved to be a prophet, mighty in deed and word in the sight of God and all the people, and how the chief priests and our rulers handed him over to be sentenced to death and crucified him. But we were hoping that it was he who was going to redeem Israel. Indeed, besides all this, it's now the third day since these things have happened." They are devastated. We had hoped. This is going to be the answer to all of our questions. This is going to be what life is all about. He had the key to everything. We had hoped. But everything that Jesus stood for at this point in their life, everything Jesus stood for was a failure. Everything he said was a lie at this point. I mean, Jesus said, "I'm the good shepherd." Okay, what's the shepherd going to do? Well, this shepherd's going to die at the hands of the wolves. He says, "I am the way and the truth and the life. I'm the sinless Son of God." And yet he dies as a common thief. He dies as a common sinner. He says, "I am the resurrection and the life, And yet he dies so quickly on the cross that Pilate's amazed. And he says, are you sure? And he has to send somebody out to make sure that he's already dead. I mean, everything Jesus taught, everything he stood for is now a lie. We hoped it would all come true. We hoped that he would be the Messiah. At the cross, it all becomes a lie. It becomes a scam. There has never been a night that was so dark as when Jesus was crucified. But, there's the conjunction but here in the middle of verse 20. But your grief will be turned into joy. Things are going to change. You know, the irony of the cross is that everything he stood for just becomes nothing. But that sorrow is going to be turned into joy. And he uses the example of childbirth. Childbirth. The hour has come for her to give birth. And his hour has come. It's not a surprise. Jesus knew what was going to happen. Just like a woman knows, and she's been waiting and she's been looking forward to that hour. And that hour is going to be painful. They can measure pain now, and they say the two most painful things you can go through is passing a kidney stone and having a baby. People have a kidney stone, they say, never, ever again do I want to go through that in my life again. Women go through that pain, and then afterwards says, that wasn't so bad, I want to do that again. They might go through it 2 or 3 more times, and some more than that. I remember on our first child, my goodness, the pain that my wife was going through, and I'd already been warned by our Lamaze teacher, don't let her get her hands on you during those contractions. She might just you might lose an arm or something. I'm standing back because she's going through that pain, and I thought, wow, I can't believe all this. And then the baby's born, and I remember her words. Her words was, that wasn't so bad. I thought, what planet are you from? Where have you been for the last several hours? What are you talking about? I'm hurting and I didn't even go through it. Just watching you was painful. I mean, it is a painful thing, but the joy of a child takes all that sorrow away. And the resurrection does that for us. The resurrection changes sorrow into joy. And so the resurrection forces us to evaluate the cross. What is the cross really about? Well, the cross becomes something joyous. The cross itself becomes something joyous. The apostles write about the cross, and they write about it with wonder and awe. You know, so often we look at the cross and we agonize with Jesus, but because of the resurrection, we don't have to agonize any longer. He's done what he's come to do, and now that the resurrection has come, we see the benefit of the cross. We see what a blessing it was. And Paul could say in 1 Corinthians 2nd chapter verse 2, I determined to know nothing about among you except Jesus Christ and him crucified. He says, we preach Christ crucified. We sing of the cross because of the resurrection. All that sorrow on the cross has been turned into joy. All the lies that Jesus appeared to be saying on the cross has all become true. He is the good shepherd. He is the way and the truth and the life. He is the resurrection and the life. Everything he said becomes true through the resurrection. It changes everything. Everything. And it's not that we just have a change of perspective now. We have a change of reality now. The reality is Jesus rose from the dead. That's the reality. And if Jesus rose from the dead, the promise is that you and I will raise from the dead as well. That death is not the end of life. Death is just another aspect of life. It's that transition. We're looking forward to the resurrection. We can turn the sorrow into joy. You know, and funerals we become ambivalent in funerals oftentimes because, well, our hearts are grieving, but we have this joy within us as well, especially because our loved one was a Christian, and we know what's happening. It's not that we are just trying to, make believe that things are all going to be okay. It's not that our perspective is different. We have a different reality. We're looking at life totally different. It changes the way we look at life. Here's 2 Corinthians 4. Therefore, we do not lose heart. But though our outer person is decaying, yet our inner person is being renewed day by day. For our momentary light affliction is producing for us an eternal weight of glory far beyond all comparison. While we look not at the things which are seen, but the things which are not seen. For the things which are seen are temporal, but the things which are not seen are eternal. It's this perspective that we have of another reality. We don't see it, but we know it's real. And so it gets us through everything. I was reading of a teacher who was going to hospitals in a big city, and her job was to go and help the kids that are in the hospital to keep up with their schoolwork so they don't get behind in their schoolwork. And so they gave her the name of a boy and his room number and asked if she could go and help him with his verbs and adverbs, because they didn't want him to get behind in this. And so she said, oh, of course, I'll go to him. And so she went. But what she didn't realize is this young boy was in a burn unit. And he was severely burned. And she was, she could hardly stay in the room with him. But she did what she's sent to do. She said, I was sent to you to help you with your verbs and adverbs. And so she went on with the lesson and left. Well, later the next day, she came back, and one of the nurses said, "What did you do to that boy?" And she thought, well, maybe she had done something wrong. And she said, well, I don't know. And she began to apologize. And the nurse says, oh, no. It's not something you did wrong. But ever since you've been there, this boy has been fighting for his life. Ever since you've been here, he just seems to have a newness in him. And we just wondered what you did. She says, I don't know. I just taught the lesson. Well, a couple of weeks later, the boy was actually able to now communicate. And they said, well, what happened? And he says, well, I knew that if they were going to send a little boy, a teacher, to teach him about verbs and adverbs, then he was going to live. They weren't expecting him to die. And I knew if I was going to live, then I was going to get going and move. This is the hope that he had. And this is like with us. We know that there's more to life than what we're going through. We can get through whatever it is because of the reality of the resurrection. And that's what this section is all about for me. C.S. Lewis, he wrote all that we call human history. Money, poverty, ambition, war, prostitution, classes, empires, slavery is the long, terrible story of man trying to find something other than God which will make him happy. I'm amazed at how he can summarize things in just one sentence. He says, the driving force of history is happiness. How can I be happy without God? From sin to slavery, to prostitution, to racism, to terrorism, to extortion, all is driven by a desire to be happy apart from God. And what we find is a tremendous joy because of God. Our greatest challenge is not atheism, denying Jesus, denying God, denying that God exists. It's refusing to believe that only through God can I find ultimate joy. That's our challenge. That only through God can we find ultimate joy. Can we really find what we want in life? Is by finding God, serving God, seeking God. In Psalm 30, and I read that previously, Psalm 30, verse 5, at the end of verse 5, he says, weeping may last for a night, but a shout of joy comes in the morning. What a beautiful thought. Weeping may last for the night, but a shout of joy comes in the morning. Bill and Gloria Gaither wrote a song based on this passage. It says, if you've knelt beside the rubble of an aching, broken heart, when the things you gave your life to fell apart, you're not the first to be acquainted with sorrow, grief, or pain, but the Master promised sunshine after rain. Hold on, my child. joy comes in the morning. Weeping only lasts for the night. Hold on, my child, joy comes in the morning. The darkest hour means dawn is just in sight. I think that the majority of us can relate to this lesson. Jesus closes this section with verse 22. He says, therefore you too grieve now, but I will see you again, and your heart will rejoice, and no one will take your joy away from you. That's where we're at. We might grieve now. You know, some people look at that in a little while. It's obviously looking at his death and resurrection. Some people think, well, it's the second coming. I think it applies to that too. I think it applies to a lot of things. Sorrow might be part of our life now, but there's going to become a day of rejoicing, and what a day that will be.